In this video, we'll be learning how to write the equation of a line into point-slope form. In order to write an equation of a line into point-slope form, we need two key pieces of information. And this is where in math we're very obvious with our naming of things. If we're writing an equation into point-slope form, what we need to write the equation into that form is first, we need a point on the line. And that can be any point on the line, it doesn't matter. And that point we'll call x of point 1 and y of point 1. Then the other piece of information that we need is also right in the name. We need the slope. So in order to write the equation of a line into point-slope form, we will need a point and a slope. Now once we have those two pieces of information, we're going to substitute them into this equation here. And essentially what's going to happen is we're going to take x of our point and we're going to replace it into the x1 spot in point-slope form. Then we're going to take the y of our point and we're going to substitute it into the y1 spot of our equation. And then remember, slope, a fancy letter for slope is m, so we're going to take our slope and we're going to substitute it in for the m slot. So all we're doing is taking these key pieces of information and substituting them into this equation that we see here. So what we're going to do in this example is we're going to write the equation of a line that goes through the points 4, 3, and 6, 6. And we're going to write the equation of that line into point-slope form. So our goal is to put it into this form right here. So we have y minus the y-coordinate of a point on our line equals m, parentheses x minus the x-coordinate of a point on our line. So when we're writing an equation into point-slope form, we know that we need to find a point, which we can see we have two of, so we have more than we need, and we need to find the slope. And since we don't have the slope here, what we need to do is we need to find it by using what we already know about slope. So we already know our slope equation from when we learned how to graph lines. So we have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what we're going to do before we write an equation into point-slope form is we first need to find the slope. So here our slope, notice here that I have 2 points up here. So in order to find the slope between those 2 points, I'm going to label them x of point 1, y of point 1, x of point 2, and y of point 2. So I take y2, which is 6, minus y1, which is 3, over x2, which is also 6, minus x1, which is 4. So then I subtract, so I have 3 over 2, and I find that my slope is 3 over 2. So now that I have my slope, I can actually write my equation into point-slope form. The next step after we found our slope is to find one point on our line. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter which point we pick. So you can pick either point. I'm just going to pick the first point because I already have it labeled as x1 and y1. So I'm going to pick the point 4, 3. But remember, you could pick the point 6, 6 as well. Then from here, I'm going to put that into point-slope form. So I'm going to start with my equation here. I'm going to take y minus the y-coordinate of the point I picked, which is 3, is equal to my slope, which I found earlier, of 3 over 2, parenthesis, x minus our x-coordinate, which is 4. So if we pick this point, this will be our equation. Now remember, we also could have picked a different point. We could have picked the point 6, 6, and if we had done that, and then we had substituted it in, it would have been y minus our y-coordinate of 6 is equal to our slope of 3 over 2 times, in parentheses, x minus our x-coordinate, which was 6. So either one of these would work. You could have point 1 or point 2 as long as you take your slope and 1 point and substitute it into this equation. You are writing an equation of this line in point-slope form. So here our goal again is to write the equation of a line in point-slope form. And here I notice they give me a different set of information. They give me m equals 1/2, which remember m is a fancy word for slope. And then they just give me 1 point. And remember, I need a point and a slope to write the equation of a line in point-slope form. So since I have my slope here and I have a point, so I have x1 and y1, I can go and I can write it into point-slope form. And remember, point-slope form is y minus my y-coordinate is equal to my slope times x minus my x-coordinate. So from here, I'm just going to take the values that I have and substitute them in to this equation. So I have y minus my y-coordinate, which is 4, is equal to my slope of 1/2 times x minus my x-coordinate, which is a -3. So notice how I have a minus a negative here. What I do want to make sure I do is make sure I rewrite anytime I see a negative as a plus. So we're going to rewrite this as y minus 4 is equal to 1/2 times, in parentheses, x plus 3 to utilize keep, change. So there we have the equation of a line with this slope and this point in point-slope form. So here again, I want to write the equation of a line in point-slope form. So remember, I need a point, which I can see I have 2, so I'm good there. And then I also need the slope, which I can see I do not have, so I know I will need to calculate. So my slope is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I need to label my points as x1, y1, x2, y2, and then substitute. So I have 1 minus 3, my y2 minus my y1, over x2, which is 5, minus x1, which is 3. So here I end up with -2 over a +2, which simplifies to -1 over 1, or a slope of -1. So here I can see that my slope is a -1. Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to write the equation of my line into point-slope form. Remember, that's y minus my y-coordinate is equal to my slope times x minus my x-coordinate. And since I have 2 points, I'm going to write this in 2 different ways. So there are 2 possible equations that you could write for me here. The first one, I'm going to use this point of 3, 3. So I would have y minus my y-coordinate of 3 is equal to my slope of -1 times, in parentheses, x minus my x-coordinate, which is 3. So that's one example of an equation that you could have. A second option that you might have is here in orange. So we might use that second point of 5, 1. So same process, y minus our y-coordinate of 1 is equal to our slope of -1 times x minus our x-coordinate of 5. So either one of these answers right here will work as an equation for the line going through these 2 points in point-slope form. So here we have a different representation of a line, and we're going to write its equation in point-slope form. So remember, to write it in point-slope form, we need a point, which I can see I have 2 points here, so I'm good to go. I have 2 options for my points. And then I need to find my slope. And you can either find your slope by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, using the points that you're given, or you can just find your rise over your run from one point to another. So here we're going to go from this point here in orange down to the point in black. To get there, my slope, I need to go vertically down 3, so that's a -3, and then I need to go in the positive x direction 2. So my slope is a -3 over 2. So then what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to write it into point-slope form. Here, for the first point, I'm going to use 2, 3. So I'm going to do y minus my y-coordinate, which is 3, is equal to my slope of -3 over 2 times, in parentheses, x minus my x-coordinate, which is 2. So that's one example of a possible answer that you might have here for the equation of this line in point-slope form. Now if you picked the other point, which I circled here in green, we'd have We'll call that x2 and y2. So our option here would be y minus our y coordinate, which is 0, is equal to our slope, which is negative 3 over 2, times in parentheses x minus our x coordinate, which is 4. So again, remember, either one of these answers will work as the equation of this line in point-slope form. So this final example here utilizes function notation. So this one takes a little bit more work, but it's the same process. Ultimately, we're going to write the equation of a line in point-slope form that goes through the 2 points that are listed here in function notation. So remember, when this says f of 3, what this is really saying is that x is equal to 3. So this is saying x equals 3, and when that happens, the function equals 5. So this is really saying when x equals 3, y, the function, is equal to 5. Because remember, f is a fancy word for y. So here what they're really giving us is they're giving us the coordinate 3, 5. And then if we look at the second one, this is really saying, okay, when x is equal to negative 2, then remember this is a fancy word for y, saying when x is equal to negative 2, y is equal to negative 5. So here again we have a coordinate kind of snuck in there. So as we start these function notation problems, we need to remember that this is telling us an x and y pair. Now if we're going to write the equation into point-slope form, we need to start by finding our slope because we already have 2 points. So my points I'm going to label as x1, y1, x2, y2, and remember my equation for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So here I'm going to substitute. I have negative 5 minus 5 over negative 2 minus 3. So negative 5 minus 5 is negative 10. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. If we simplify that, we get 2 over 1, or 2. Now at this point, I have a point and a slope. So I'm just going to pick this point right here as my point. So I would take y minus my y coordinate of 5 is equal to my slope of 2 times in parentheses x minus my x coordinate, which is 3. Then remember, we have 2 possibilities here because we actually have 2 points on this line. So if we picked this answer, or this point here in purple, we would have y minus our y coordinate of negative 5 is equal to 2 times x minus our x coordinate of negative 2. Utilizing keep, change, change, I would have y plus 5 is equal to 2 times x plus 2. And finally here, we're going to take a look at a word problem. So let's start off by reading this and underlining what we think is important. It says, your friend has recently released a new book that is on average selling 30 copies per day. By the 4th day of sales, 620 books have been sold. So this first question here says, what pieces of information can we pull out of this? A couple of key things that I want you to know. First is that anytime we see this word per is typically talking about the slope. So if it says that you're selling 30 copies per day, what that's really saying is 30 copies of books per day is our rate of change in our situation, and that is typically our slope. So our slope here is going to be 30. Then from here, we're seeing on the 4th day of sales, we sold 620 books. We can tell that these two pieces of information pair up. So what's really happening here is anything that looks like it pairs up is actually creating a point. So we have 4 days, and at 4 days, we've sold 620 books. Now, oftentimes, students get confused. Well, how do I know that it goes 4, 620? Well, time, which here is in days, time is typically the x variable. So maybe making a note of that. Time is typically our x variable. So here in this problem, we have 1 point of 4, 620, and we have the slope. Then here in the second part, it says, what do x and y represent in words? Well, because we labeled our point well, we can see, okay, our x coordinate, x is our number of days, because we can see that 4 days is in our x coordinate, and then we can see y is equal to, right here, the 620 is the number of books sold. So we can see our x and y pairing here of 4 days, comma 620 books. Then lastly, it says write an equation in point slope form to represent the situation. So we're going to do this the same way we did before. Y minus our y coordinate, which here is 620, is equal to our slope, which is 30, times x minus our x coordinate, which in this case is 4. So here we've written the equation of a line in point slope form. We utilized a point and a slope to write this equation. Then finally in point D, we're actually going to apply this. And here it says use the equation you found in part C to find how many books are sold by the 10th day. Well, I see day, and I know that x corresponds with the number of days, so this is saying I now want to utilize this equation that I wrote here, and it's telling me that x is equal to 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my equation written in point slope form, and I'm going to substitute 10 in for x. So here I have y minus 620 is equal to 30 times 10 minus 4. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this for y by itself. So I'm going to start just by simplifying this right-hand side here. So I'm going to start with the parentheses. So this is really saying 30 times 6. And then I'm going to perform the multiplication. So I have 180. So here I have y minus 620 is equal to 180. I then want to get y by itself, so I'm going to add 620 to each side. And here I find out that at the 10th day, we have sold 800 books.